Thank you very much, and really glad that you are all here, and we can exchange views. It should be as informal as possible. So if you want to ask questions, please do. Even if you want to ask questions at the beginning of the meeting. I'm very glad that at least part of the Bigley family is here with us through Zoom. We understand that the situation now in Germany again is problematic because it is facing the fourth wave of COVID. So it's difficult to meet in person. This is a family which is very much involved with the efforts to solve the conflict, and is especially putting an emphasis on the role of religions in the conflict and in its solution. This issue of the role of religions is a very, very interesting one, and not simple, because it has two faces. One face is that religions tend to be extreme. It's very difficult to compromise on the vision, on the end game, on the end of the day. And rather than more secular people who tend to be more pragmatic usually, this is not the only option, but many of them are ready to take compromises, and their red lines are different than the red lines of very religious people. But there is also another face to it, another side. And this is the ability of religious people to separate between the agreements of today and the vision for tomorrow. Now, the visions of tomorrow may be very conflicting. Usually, the vision of the religions is that all the other people will see the light and follow them. Because this is the truth. I mean, if you believe in one truth, that truth means that with the help of God or whatever, during the years, maybe not in our generation, maybe not even in the next generation, but sometimes in the future, everybody will see that the right way is ours, whoever we are. But if this is the case, it is easier to say, okay, in the meantime means until the end of the days, until the resurrection, until the Messiah, which may happen today or tomorrow, and may happen in 1,000 years. We never know these things. We have to be prepared for the Messiah, which doesn't mean that he or she may come at all. And this is why it may be easier, and sometimes it is, to have agreements which are kind of ad hoc agreements with religious people who may be very extreme about the future, but may be ready in the meantime to have a compromise. More than secular people. So here, the question is whether the peacemakers are able to use the other face of their religion, the readiness to separate between today and tomorrow, rather than give up on the role of the religious people, because they tend to be more extreme than others by definition. It is difficult for most of them to compromise on God, on the message, on the religious message. So that is the question, and I think that what the Blickler family is doing is exactly that. I mean, trying to exploit, I would say, the other face of religion, and to say, okay, let us not now talk about what will happen at the end of the days. Let us talk about pragmatic steps for tomorrow. What do you say about ABC? And the answer is, in many cases, okay, if you are speaking about tomorrow, I have nothing against, this solution or another. And you, as a religious person, or as a non-religious person, should say, okay, that's a kind of a compromise. Let's agree on the current situation, on what is happening today and tomorrow, and keep our differences for the future. And I think that here, if the efforts which are being done, have been done in the last generation, for having meetings among religious leaders, the monotheistic religions, if these efforts succeed, then the power that these people are having is in many cases bigger than the one that non-religious people are having. Because they are spiritual leaders, and you suspect them much less, that their only interest is to get some votes or support or whatever, that they are really speaking purely. And then it is easier to support them, to follow them, and to accept what they suggest. So they may abuse it by inciting, which is happening regretfully, and they can use it positively by telling their people, let's go for peace. And this is the point. I think that it is a very important point. I cannot say that, although if you read the Geneva Initiative, you will see the role of the religious people, especially in the Jerusalem, in the solution for Jerusalem. But I cannot say that we really were wise enough to use all the potential which is there with the issue of religion. And with the help of the Blickler family, I think that it would be easier for us to do it in the future. I hope so. Now, I was asked to speak about the developments towards a permanent agreement in the last generation or so. And what I can tell you is that we are taking it today for granted. The two-state solution, the division of Jerusalem, the 67 borders with land swaps, the solution for the refugees, which will be according to the Clinton parameters. Some of them most of them will come to the Palestinian state. Some of them will come to Israel. Some of them will come to third parties. There will be a compensation to the families, and so on and so forth, as a given. But I can tell you that a few years ago, I mean, 25, 30 years ago, it was not obvious. And although we are frustrated by the fact that we still don't have peace after all these years, we cannot say that nothing happened. A lot happened, not enough, not according to our dreams, much less than that. But we cannot say that nothing happened, because, for example, one of the things is that unlike other conflicts in the world, Take Kashmir, for example. If I ask you, what is the solution to Kashmir? You may have your own solutions, but there is no agreed upon solution by the world about Kashmir. And it is a real problem, an international problem, a huge one. And the same goes for many other conflicts. Once, I think that it was Boutros Ghali, when he was Secretary General of the UN, he told me, Yossi, we have 72 international conflicts. Maybe today we have a little bit more, but some of them were solved. Some of them were solved and then we opened them. But the uniqueness of our conflict is that it has a solution. Very few of them have solutions. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody in the world agrees to it, or amongst us, Palestinians and Israelis. But this is a very long way since we could not speak about a solution, mainly because we didn't know what it would be. And I would like to dedicate some of my words to this issue of not knowing what the solution would be. Because, I mean, the story begins after the First World War. The First World War is the main milestone of our story. Not that there were no Palestinian movements before, Palestinian clubs which talked about intellectually about Palestinian nationalism, but it was very marginal. There was also the Zionist movement, but most of the Jews were not Zionists in the world. It was a minority. And what happened is that suddenly the powers of the West won the war and could divide or redivide the world while Turkey was defeated. So this was the point of what would be now. Now, usually, after such wars, what happened? Colonialism. I mean, the empires which won would occupy the territory, colonize it, and it would become part of it. Like, for example, Algiers for France. Algiers was part of France. It was not Outre-mer, what they call it. Here, the idea was that the first war, it was called the Grand War. This war, the World War, would be the end of the war, of the wars. Now, what should one do with the end of the wars? Establish an international organization which will put an end to wars and make peace. And that was the League of Nations. Now, parallel to it, the idea was not to colonize territories, but to have to give the empires mandates over specific territories in order to help the local people to have their own autonomy and then independence. And here we come into the picture. I mean, the Middle East was divided, especially between France and Britain, which were very important empires or superpowers in the region. And the question was, which superpower will get what part? Until they are preparing the people who live there to have their own autonomy or independence. And that was the big question. The the British decided upon the Balfour Declaration in November 17, before they came to the land, to Palestine. So it was only on the paper. It was a letter to the head of the Zionist movement in Britain, Lord Rothschild, 67 words, in which the government of Britain handed over to the Jewish people, to the Zionist movement, the right for a national home in Palestine, without mentioning the Palestinians, but only non-Jewish inhabitants of the place, while the Jews were about 10% of the inhabitants, and the Palestinians were 90%. So the Palestinians couldn't believe that it happened to them. I mean, we are the majority, we are here, and you are promising to the people which doesn't live here that this is their homeland, while you are not here to give it to them at all. So the reaction of the Arabs who live here is not inconceivable. It's quite obvious. On the other hand, the British government, part of it, including Balfour, Lord Balfour, who was the one who signed the agreement, were religious people who believed very much in the Bible and believed that the Jews should play a very important role if they return to their old homeland. Now, that was the main basis for that. Besides political interests that they wanted the American Jews to help them, it was still in the midst of or towards the end, but it was still in the midst of the First World War. And because of the role that Chaim Weizmann, who was the most important Zionist leader, helped the Brits in having the artificial acetone. You know about it?
No.
He was a chemist.
Right, he was a chemist.
Yes.
So I'll tell you, because it is a side story, but it is an important one, which shows that the variables which are creating a political situation are in many cases very personal. Chaim Weizmann was a chemist, and he moved from East Europe to Britain and studied there in Manchester, and was a professor in Manchester. Now, don't ask me what is the role of the acetone. You say acetone?
It's like
For
used
the-
to make bombs.
Pardon?
It used to make weapons. It was weaponized.
Yeah, but usually women use acetone in order
To
to
remove nail polish.
take off the
Acetone.
manicure.
Like the nail polish remover?
Yeah.
Okay.
They call it
So how do
acetone.
you?
Like,
Acetone.
yeah, alcohol, rubbing alcohol.
Okay.
The milra.
The mineral. So the question is, the point was that there is apparently natural acetone, and the Britain needed much more for its artillery. I don't know what is the role of acetone in the artillery, but take my words. So Chaim Weizmann was the one who invented the artificial acetone. So it was limitless. And the British government appreciated very much this invention. So it was much easier for somebody like him to come to London to meet with the ministers, because he was the guy who invented the acetone. And he took a very, very important role in the Declaration of Balfour, which became kind of the worst thing which could happen to the Palestinians, Va'ad Balfour,
Ouais.
and the best thing which happened to Jews. So you see here a situation of zero sum. It's a zero or minus for one side, and sum, a big sum, for the other side. And luckily for the Zionist movement, which was for the first time actually recognized by the superpowers, was that the mandate on Palestine quoted the letter of Balfour to Rothschild word by word, so that it was not only a promise of the British government to the Zionist movement, it was now the word